Guys, this is Nate to Wait and this is Crossbeats Productions. So I'm throwing this quick video together. This is the beat that I made for the previous video that I did. Not too sure if you can hear the screaming kids in the background, but hey, that's alright. Let's keep going with this video. I got like kids playing in the driveway, I don't know, who knows. Anyway, so pretty much this beat was, yesterday I started a beat. I put up a video yesterday about this particular beat, and I want to kind of explain the behind the scenes of it and kind of go in depth of some parts of the beat as well. But in this particular video, I'm actually just going to show you how I mix the low end on the track itself. I'll play a bit of the beat and I'll let you hear it, and then I'll explain what I did to the low end to get that to the sound that sounds right now. So pretty much, as you can see, it's pretty simple, straightforward kind of beat here. There's not too much to it, and I kind of like to build my beats basic like that anyway, but it's the way it is. So anyway, let's get into the sound of it and go through that there, and I'll explain to you in a second. Alright, so what I did so far, what I've done so far, is obviously with the beat, there's hardly any mixing going on right now. This is pretty much all raw, basically. There's not a whole lot, like I said. I've done some minute EQ here and there, and some compression as well. The mix bus on there, I pretty much don't have anything at this point. I normally probably put a compressor on there at this stage, which I did have an SSL on there to get that extra bit of kick out of the track. But you know, you can pretty much get your track as a static, I guess, a static mix without too much going on as far as EQ and stuff like that. One thing that I would recommend, especially with building beats like this, or any kind of beat for that matter, I would tend to stick to the same kind of VST plugin that you're using. So I mean, it's not rule of thumb or anything like that, but if you're going to make certain tracks that use, say for example, a lot of synth tracks and things like that, you don't probably want to mix too many different types of synths together. It does start to get very difficult to mix that sort of thing, and I've found in my past experience anyway, at least, that when I start to mix different synths together, that it's just really difficult to make a good track. But it's not to say you can't, and it's definitely not to say that it's not possible. I'm just saying, in my experience, that's how I have had trouble before in my mixes, with just all different types of synths that I used. But anyway, I'll break down this track probably in the second part 2 of this video. I just wanted to do a quick how to mix the low end on your trap beat, and I'll explain what I did to do that. So if you don't have this plugin, which I'm using right now, which is called Neutron, you don't have to have this plugin to do this trick. It's just a lot easier to do this trick with it. Now, the main thing that I would recommend, especially with your low end on your track, is I've done another low end video and I'm pretty sure I explained some parts of this before, but I want to do a bit more in depth of that. So first off, what I would normally do is obviously build your track, get your track together, have it sounding kind of somewhat how you want it to sound without any EQ or anything like that. Well, at least minimal EQ, because as soon as you start introducing EQ into your track, you're going to introduce phase issues into your track. Believe it or not, EQ does affect certain parts of the phase of what you're EQing, and it will start to sound a bit weird if you put certain EQ moves on certain things in the wrong timing. So what I tend to do is build my track up without EQ, and then I assess what needs to be there and what doesn't, and I try and work around that. So anyway, with my low end of the track, one thing is I've got the console shaper already going, so that's why you can see all this noise that's happening on the actual track there. So I'll just leave that on because it's doing certain things that I want it to do for the track. But with the low end, for example, what I would do is I'd build my track like I said. I'd solo the low end 808 or whatever the low end, the main 808 or whatever you've got there. Say it's a glide like I've got. I'd solo that, and then I'd also solo my kick. And then I just listen to those two things together and see what they sound like in unison and how they sound. If they sound like they're pretty cohesive, then it's a good sign that at least your static mix is somewhat decent. So let's just turn off all the plugins on this. Where is the button? There it is. Let's just turn off all the plugins and see what my low end sounds like without plugins on it. So I'll just go straight to this part where it's got a kick and bass at the same time, and I'll play that from there, okay? Alright, as you can hear, low end sounds pretty good already. There's not a whole lot that needs to be done with it. The first thing that I did with my low end, by the way, just so you kind of know, is I introduced Red Light District, which is a standard plugin within Studio 1.3. So if you have Studio 1.3, you can get this and use this. It's really good for getting that growl out of your bass. It definitely gives some more mid-range frequencies that are pretty desirable most times. And it works out well. So I don't know what's going on with this. It usually has a... Oh wait, no, I know what's going on. Okay, yeah, cool. So anyway, so when I introduce that, you'll see in a second. So I'm just going to slowly introduce things so you can hear the difference between the two. I'll just leave that up the top there, somewhere around here. Actually, no, I'll put it over here. There we go. Alright, cool. So red light's there, and this is my EQ that's mixing the bass, and so it's my bass basically, and then it's mixing with the drums. And this inverse link, which I'll explain in a minute, I'm using. But if you don't have Neutron, there's other ways to do it, so I'll show you how to do that as well with another EQ, or maybe even the stock EQ in this. So what I would normally do is I get my kick, and on this particular track I've got my Neutron on my drum bus. So you can do it one of two ways. You can do it on the actual kick itself, like so get your EQ, put it onto the kick. So say you got an EQ, just using a standard Presonus one just so in case you don't have anything else. So say you got your EQ, you perform your EQ move and basically get to the boost where you want to boost it, or cut where you want to cut. Generally when I'm listening for certain frequencies, when I'm listening for them, I'm trying to tend to listen to the ugly frequencies first and get rid of those. Then I go for the things that sound good, maybe with a separate EQ altogether actually as well. So I might even put a separate EQ on there just so I can get some additional bands on my EQ and do that. But first off, let me just play, I'll just get rid of that for now, and I'll just play the bass and the kick together so you can hear those, and I'll just fiddle around with this EQ and I'll show you kind of what I would do as an idea. Right there, it's got like this real flabbery, boxy kind of sound. Now that's one of the sounds that you probably don't want to have in your kick in general, but sometimes you do kind of have some of boxy sound. It depends on the beat that you're applying it to. But anyway, what I do is just get that and reduce, cut the Q down a bit. Okay, so that's one way of doing reductive EQ pretty effectively, and you then can find out what doesn't sound right and what sounds good and all that sort of stuff. So I guess especially with drums, you want to have your drums in key of your actual beat for the most part. When I say that, I don't think it always matters 100% if it is in key, but you know, most times out of 10, I try and get something that sounds like it's in key. When I use my drums, I'll get samples that sound like they're in key. So obviously then when I play over other stuff over the drums, they sound right. That doesn't sound like the drums are meant for some other room or some other place. Excuse me. So that's the main thing, I guess. And the thing with using these type of EQs is it's really a lot by ear. So say, for example, you're using an EQ that doesn't have notes like this. So on my EQ here for the Neutron, it tells me what note or key that it's actually EQing out. So if I'm looking at that, that's at about 50 hertz. 150, sorry. 150. And what do we got here? 200. So it's not even really that close. But say if I moved it to 150, I'll just see what the frequency says there. Yeah, okay, that's really good, because that frequency there is kind of annoying, so I'd probably cut that out, like what happened here. But that's kind of the way that you do it. You have to just search around for the frequencies that you're looking for to remove. So reductive EQ, by far probably the best thing you can do at the start. Just get rid of all the stuff that you don't like. Don't kill the kick in doing it, by the way. Don't like start removing all this low end stuff that you don't need to remove if you don't need to remove it. Don't remove the top end stuff if you don't need to get rid of that. Just effectively EQ whatever it is that you're trying to EQ. So that's just one tip there. I just wanted to show you guys if you didn't have this set up here. Now, actually, I'll leave that on. No, I'll turn it off for a second, and I'll just explain to you what I would do with the bass and the kick together to get some kind of uniformity. And then once I EQ it, and I'll show you. Once I show you, I mean, I'll explain exactly what I did with the Neutron plugin as well. So I'll just turn that off now, and just want to see what's on my. Okay, sweet. So that's the drums, that's the bass, and I'll just play without first, and then I'll play it with the plugins on. You can hear the difference between the two. Okay, so plugins off. Let's go. Okay, so I can explain to you basically what I feel has happened in this situation. So what I've done is blended the kick and the bass so they really just harmonize together. Before the EQ, there definitely had a bit more, I guess, snap to the kick. and the bass seemed to be like it was there, and the mid-range frequency was there, but the bass didn't have any of that low-end stuff. Now, when you're looking at bass and kick together, it's pretty difficult to get the right mix all the time. And I guess the things that you got to really pay attention to is not just listening in your studio, but listening on other speakers and hearing what happens when you introduce certain frequencies in the bass. But to that effect, like I said, I was chasing a real fat kind of thick bass, and that's kind of what I've done with this beat, and that's where the kick and the bass kind of sit together and they really joint. So what I did, which is cool on this, is inverse link. It's basically the same kind of thing I was going to explain to you in just a minute, but inverse link allows you to get one of these, say on the drums, get the low end frequency here and cut out some of the low end frequency and introduce some of the top end, sorry, the low end frequency on the bass. So this is the kick down here, and this is my bass up here. So when I've got the masking feature on, it tells me pretty much what is what and what's masking what. So if I just play this together and just turn this up a bit, there we go. So as you can see, with the masking feature, I can actually see that I've got one set of frequencies that are really pretty much pushing the other ones, pretty much, I guess, creating masking to an effect. But basically what I did was I increased the bass, the drums frequency apart in this area here, and then I lowered the frequencies at the bass on the same area. So if I just move those together, you can see that they're both affected pretty much equally in the same way, but opposite directions. So I'm getting a reduction with my bass and I'm getting an increase with my kick. So to get the right sound that I was looking for, I kind of just played around a bit to get to the frequencies, but I knew that my frequency of the kick, the main frequency, was A sharp, and that's what my beat, the key of the beat, is in. So if I know that that's the main frequency, then I kind of just played around with that area to make sure it was sounding correct and how I wanted it to sound. So let me just show you the difference, and I'll just explain to you how you could do this without this this plugin here. But alright, so it kind of is a bit more in unison, and there's a reduction on my bass and an increase in the kick. So it tells me that that's masking that area there a bit, but when I take down there we go. So the meter's a bit less sensitive now, so it's at mid kind of sensitivity, so it's not fully masking it right now. But say I just turned off number 2, you can see it starts to increase a bit in masking, because I've basically increased the volume of the bass, and the kick is already now increased. So if I just put that back on, obviously it's reducing the volume in that frequency spectrum there, so I'm getting sort of a blended meshed kick and bass together. So that's kind of what I did with that. I just wanted to explain that as a quick overview. Now the same would apply if you basically got an EQ from your stock EQ here. So you got your 808 glide, and you do the same thing pretty much. So if you've got another EQ, I'll just put an EQ from PreSonus onto my my bus track there, and I'll just quickly show you. So you know, same would apply. You just basically get your frequencies here, and I know kind of the frequency was around about somewhere like 80, 90 maybe. I can't remember exactly. I'll have to have a look. Where were we? So 60 hertz, okay. Alright, so we're at 60 hertz. Let's move down to 60, close to there. And let's get an increase here. It's somewhere about 60 or so. Alright, cool. So that's kind of the setup that you would do if you're going to mix your bass using a standard EQ. So the same would apply. It's basically the same thing. It's not anything different to any magical EQ or anything like that. It's just you're reducing some in your bass. Oh, sorry, increasing some of your kick, reducing some of your bass. So other way around. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the setup. So obviously if we play it, there you go, you can kind of hear it. It's kind of the same kind of similar sound. I have to mess around with it obviously a bit more to get it to sound exactly right, but that's kind of the gist I was trying to tell you. I mean, you can just do this without those plugins if you wanted to. The other thing I wanted to just quickly show you was on this red light district, basically what I did was I created some of that growl. So this plugin is fantastic. It kind of helped me get the bass out of the way of the kick in essence anyway. But when I put the growl in, it gives it a bit more that mid sort of tone frequencies that I'm chasing, you know, that sort of sound. So if I play it all together. See, obviously everything is in context. You have to listen in context as well. You can't just EQ something and then get back in there and hope that it sounds good. You have to, first off, yeah, I mean, obviously solo things so you can hear what's going on with the mix and you can hear what's going on with that specific instrument, but don't continue to solo every single thing and mix it just in solo, because eventually, you know, you're gonna run into issues where certain things are missing out of the mix and you didn't know what it was that you took out, or you have to go back and fix it again to get it back in. So what I tend to do, especially with my beats, is, like I said, I build the beat first, I get that sorted out, I get the static mix done. So as you can see, there's hardly anything happening with the faders right now. I've got a little bit of automation happening with this one, so this fader here slowly increases. And again with this fader, as you can see, it gets to about here. So showing you the automation, that's basically the automation that I've got going on with that. So slightly increasing here, then it dips off. Obviously there's no reason for that to dip off there, there's nothing happening there, but it does dip off here, and I reduce some volume just to create the ambience. I didn't want the full volume of that particular track at the time. So, you know, things like automation, you can set automation up even before you start to EQ if you want. That's something that you could do. You could set it up afterwards, after your EQ, I should say. It just comes down to personal taste, to be honest, and it really just comes down to what you want in the mix at the time. And to create a mix that flows and to create a track that's not entirely boring, that you can sit there and listen to over and over again, you want to have some kind of variety. So the things I did in the variety, I'll explain in this part 2 of this video. So if you can hang around for the next one, I'll show you exactly what I did for variety in this beat and explain that as well. But otherwise, I hope you guys enjoyed this quick tutorial, and if there's anything in the comments, just let me know. I'm happy to help you guys out, and also remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because it does help me out. I'm getting a lot of attention now on this channel, and I'm really appreciative of that. And otherwise, I love you guys, and peace!